Hey guys, so me and Buster Green here. This is going to be the last video where I talk about Robo arc, promise. Unless by some unusual circumstance I decide to revisit the manga in the future, the series is essentially over for me. And now that the series is over, I actually feel pretty good about it. So to start with, I want to say guys, I did like this series. It was a really good ride. Robo kicked some major ass. I saw the dinosaur empire in more detail than I ever thought I would. I saw the distant future of Getter. I saw a lot of cool shit. Now, I guess, if I'm being real, I did actually get schooled by a lot of it, but maybe that was just you guys hitting me up and course correcting me in the comments. Now, despite all that, it still wasn't the best standalone Getter series. That's just still Armageddon. But I can maybe say that, despite that, it's second best. It definitely felt better than the random mishmash movie that was Robo Neo, and the clusterfuck of mismatching ideas in New Robo. I guess when the series was first announced, my hope was really this was going to be a more loose adaptation, the way Armageddon was, and kind of finalize the entire franchise in like the way Turn A Gundam did. But I was wrong. This was actually a very close to the book strict adaptation, with very little added to just the last two episodes to pad out the pacing issues. Now that the series is over, I recognize that by and large, this was more than anything just created to adapt the manga and do nothing more. Now, I want to say in that aspect, it worked. It was a good adaptation. And I can actually somehow appreciate the manga more than I ever could, which is actually crazy because I still haven't read the manga. In the Reiwa era, there have been lately more introspective looks at classic mangas than ever before. And especially mangas that are classics but have never been turned into anime. And there's a big discussion about whether adapting them properly is worth it or not. I think the key suspects here are Berserk and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. JoJo was considered for years to be unadaptable, despite them doing a pretty average attempt at Stardust Crusaders in the early 90s. But then we got that miracle adaptation of the JoJo manga, which did parts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 later this year. That's a fucking miracle. We got the entire original first volume of JoJo. The whole goddamn thing, with a consistent year-to-year run. I don't know if they're going to keep pushing forward into Volume 2 with Steel Ball Run and JoJo Lion, but David Production, they pretty much have a non-stop money factory going as long as they keep adapting JoJo well. So that's amazing that they can. Now, on the flip side, we have Berserk. Berserk is another infamous manga because, unfortunately, unlike everything JoJo did right, Berserk did wrong. Berserk has never gotten a proper manga adaptation. They have the Golden Age trilogy movies, which were the start of a really close attempt to adapt the whole thing. But because the first two of those movies just retreaded the same ground as the TV anime, those movies just didn't make enough profit and they weren't popular enough with the fans to continue on and continue through the rest of the series. So because those movies failed, we ended up getting low-budget, half-assed weird adaptations as a result. Now, reflecting back on classic Robo, each Robo series has been really interesting because what would happen is Ken Ishikawa would write a manga, the manga would be awesome, and then Toei would make a TV series that would have the same story as the manga, but very little in common with it. Like, I guess the two would have a loose reflected universe where they would influence each other back and forth. But I've never seen pre-1990s Getter or read the manga, so I'm not really qualified to fully talk about all that. But it seems that every major manga volume had a direct TV parallel up until Shin Getter and Armageddon. So after Armageddon, we got Shin Getter versus Neo Getter, which it's just a weird movie. It's a bunch of random shit. Some of it's from the manga, some of it's from the TV shows. It's kind of everything they thought they could stick together. And New Getter started off really promising because I felt like they got the tone right, but then the storylines were just a mess and it really fell apart towards the end. So Getter Arc was the first time that they've honestly and earnestly tried to adapt a Getter manga straightforwardly into an anime. But it's a really weird choice for that because it's the unfinished manga. Like, it's so frustrating that of all the mangas they could have adapted, they picked Arc. Because, it's like if the only Star Wars movie ever made was Return of the Jedi, and it stopped halfway through because the ending didn't exist. And then to top it off, no one had the balls to make up an ending for it, so that's why it stopped halfway through. Now that Arc is over, I really wish they had gone the JoJo route and just given us the whole Getter saga as an epic 5-season anime where each season is better than the last. Like, I'd say there's one very small chance right now that if Arc really, really does well, they might go back to the beginning and give us the first volume, but I'm honestly not counting on it. Now, one major misconception I did have about the series was going into it based on what I was told. I thought Ken Ishikawa just died in the middle of writing Get a Robo Arc, but apparently that's not actually what happened. As it turns out, what actually happened was Get a Robo Arc just got canceled due to low sales a few years before Ishikawa died, and he just never properly got around to writing the ending as a manga, or if he did, it never got published. So I'm assuming that extra end scene at the end of the anime was probably construed from like whatever time capsule he left behind, or any conversations anyone had had with him about what happened next. Now, to this point, I still haven't read the manga. I've glanced at about maybe 3 pages of it to give myself more context about how the manga ended versus how the anime ended. And ultimately, I just have to conclude that this was a super, super tight adaptation with very little added. The series did not have a high enough budget to compete with a masterpiece like Armageddon, but for the love of God, I wish this show had had one more episode to just straighten out the pacing issues. Like, the pacing issues in the show were really bad. Like, I can't really comprehend how the show would have come off to you if you've never seen Get a Robo before. Actually, I can, because I saw a lot of reviews of the first episode by some quote-unquote mainstream anime reviewers, and they just had no fucking clue what anime this was. They gave the series massive bad reviews because they were just totally confused, and then some people weren't happy that the show literally only has one female character. 2, if you want to count the naked screaming insect bitch. I mean, at least there was that whole how to get a robo tutorial episode in episode 2. But I don't know, for me that seemed like massive pandering. But maybe that was in the manga too, or maybe it was just extra stretched out to explain what the hell was going on to normal people unfamiliar with the franchise. Since I had seen Armageddon and a lot of the other animes, I had a basic understanding of the characters, which helped me a lot, because the show just didn't really go that into Hayato's Show and Go's backstory, which they really just counted on you to know those guys already. You also kind of need to have an understanding of the fact that dinosauroids exist in the series, because that's a huge part of the show, but they really gloss over it despite the fact that the show goes more in depth over the dinosaur empire than any other series, because they're trying to explain Kamui's backstory and who he is. Other than that, the series' CGI animation was as disappointing as I originally thought it would be in the beginning. Like, I do think they made it work, and it wasn't horrible like it was in the first trailer, especially with the budget they were on. And I do think they did some cool shit with the CGI, but if I'm being completely real, retroactively, it feels to me like the best fights were in the early part of the show, in the first couple of episodes, like the fight with the Kabuki Man or the Insect Queen bitch. In those fights, the arc felt overpowered, but it moved very strong and very fast. And it just might be that because CGI is so time-consuming to do, that consequentially they only had time to really put their all into those fights. It just seems like as the show went on, the fights mattered less and less, especially when the arc got sidelined in the Dinosaur Empire arc and Black Getter was doing all the fighting. The show just had some unforgivable pacing issues. Now, I know a lot of these pacing issues just came from the manga and were kind of consequential of the fact that this was such a direct adaptation of the manga, but there were little things here and there where the pacing was just weird, and ultimately it came up short for me. Like, for example, when they were in the Dinosaur Empire arc, that arc dragged on for way too many episodes. It filled the entire middle of the show. But despite the fact that I felt like the arc there dragged on way too long, I feel like there were so many aspects of the Dinosaur Empire society that just still weren't explained and that I still don't get. Like, how do dinosaurs in the Dinosaur Empire, like, sleep? Where do they live? Are they all, like, in pens, or do they have, like, little dinosaur apartments? Meanwhile, Black Shin Getter, that was freaking awesome. I knew that was coming. That was cool. I feel like the main reason that was there was kind of to like explain the plot hole of what Andromeda Country was doing while the Ark was distracted in the Dinosaur Empire shenanigans. But still, that also leaves more questions than answers in the end. I mean, I guess really reflecting on it, I guess the Black Shin Getter was a clone of Go, trying to defend the Getter Dragon and the Sasume Lab to benefit the Getter Emperor. I don't know. I just really don't feel like they spent enough time with like the important stuff that mattered, like the Getter Emperor and the like whole Future Saga, like that, and alongside of some of the other more horrific aspects of the Getter Robo like legacy, kind of seemed a little bit smoothed over for the kids. I guess because this was airing on network TV. But what's ironic is I'm aware of those moments specifically because they were in the show, and everyone else told me that they were toned down. Like, if I have to be real, I think the tone of the show was a little bit off. It was pretty in line with the average previous Getter anime, but everyone I've spoken to kind of agrees that the Getter Robo manga overall is a very grimdark story. And I think the only anime that really dug into that grim darkness was Armageddon. So I wasn't 100% satisfied with this anime, and I mean, the biggest thing I had a problem with was the ending. I honestly hated the ending, but now that we're a few days past it, I guess I've come to accept it and respect it, because it seems that they were trying to do a very strict adaptation. So if there is anything else beyond that ending that they want to add, I guess they're going to try to add it into a movie or maybe a Super Robot Wars game, so that way they can just be like, this is the Getter Robo Arc anime. It's a perfect manga adaptation, just like Ishikawa Sensei wrote. But then if they make up an ending, they can just be like, here's your crazy ending movie we made up, where we took all these liberties. So all you manga purists can just fuck off and not watch it because it's not made up by the original artist. Anyway, so yeah, that was the Getter Robo Arc series. I'm going to be really generous and give it an 8 out of 10 for what it did right, but that compares to Armageddon's perfect 10 out of 10, Neo's 6 out of 10, and New Getter Robo's very shameful 4 out of 10. Pros here, they adapted the manga. Finally. There has never been a more accurate Getter Robo manga adaptation. I also appreciated that they added contextual scenes from other volumes of the manga where we needed them. And the show did what it could to try and fix the manga's super quick pacing. But on the flip side, the pacing is still really bad. And the fights really dropped off in quality after the first couple of episodes. And also, the manga has no ending, so this show has no ending either. Yeah. Alright, you guys. Nonetheless, it was a great time. I'm glad I shared this Getter Robo Arc experience with all of you. You guys were really fun to interact with. Special shout out to all the people who wrote me massive essays explaining why I was wrong, and special fuck you to the fact that I was right about a couple of things because it didn't follow the manga that closely. Ha ha ha. And now, because I'm absolutely curious how this will turn out, here's a supercut of every single time I correctly predicted an episode. Now, on top of that, the opening credits seem to indicate that they're also going to be up against an army of giant insects that are eating the planet, but so far that hasn't happened to the show, so maybe that's just for the credits, but I don't think so. I think the giant insects are coming. They're in too much of the credits to just be like a weird like visual metaphor. Anyway, so they all fly off the Shin Getter and disappear, and I'm really expecting, based on previous series tropes, that Shin Getter will just come back completely fine near the end of the show. And yeah, that's a nice setup. I'm looking forward to seeing Shin Getter come back, chop shit up with his big old axe. So these guys probably aren't Japanese, and they probably aren't even human. I'm hoping in the next episode they tell us what happened to Benkei. Otherwise, we might just go back to the present events with that fucking chest burster running around. Pulling some ideas out of my ass. Maybe there's some kind of dinosaur giant robot team because there's 3 of them. I think based on everything they were setting up with Hayato, the implication was that they were trying to go into the future. They need to wipe out the Andromeda Generals, and that's what they're heading into in the next episode. And then after that, unless a bigger threat shows up, there might be some hostility between Kamui and the other Dinosauroids because of the whole situation with the Getter Emperor and Musashi's gray morality. Like, possibly they might even turn on the Getter Emperor because they did seem like they were very offended by it. So, I mean, I could see the Sauruses try to, like, turn on the Emperor and try to fight it. Anyway, I'm expecting them to annihilate the Andromedans in this episode, so let's see if that happens. But I know Kamui's going to be in the next episode, so I just have to assume that he maybe went into the time hole ahead of the arc. Now, it's possible he might turn on the team, But that could be a fake out because this episode set up a lot of doubt about what Kamui's motive is and how he feels about humanity, the Getters, and the Getter team. And I can't see them ending it with Kamui being a complete bad guy because that doesn't seem like where his arc is headed. Now, Hayato does seem like he knows way too much about what's going on, but we still have a ton of mysteries to resolve in only 2 more episodes. We know Takuma is going to eventually meet up with Kamui and they're going to fight. So now if I had to take a guess for the last episode, it seems that we suddenly positioned Takuma and Kamui as arch enemies to battle it out head-to-head in the final battle to end all battles. Now, Kamui is also potentially going to kill Hayato. They are closing in on each other. They do seem like they're ready to kill each other. Now, there's a good chance he might kill Hayato, but I think what's more likely to happen is that Hayato will try to reason with him and ultimately escape, but he might still die. And even if Hayato escapes, I do think Kamui will be successful in blowing up the South Main lab and likely freeing Shin Dragon from the Getter Cauldron. Now, then there's probably going to be an awkward fast forward to a big Arc versus Bug battle, depending on how gracious the writers want to be at this point. Now, either after that, the Arc and the Bug fight the rest of the episode, but if we're lucky, we might get something more of an epilogue based on how much of the episode is not a fight. Maybe Kamui will die, but maybe he won't because I do think he has been set up as kind of like a pretty important and like heroic character. So possibly he can maybe like switch sides again and maybe convince Takuma to not let the Getter Emperor evolve into a monster and destroy like the piece of the world. That's the best good ending we could get, but we could also get a terrible ending too. Now, it does look like, based on where we're getting with the battle of Bug versus Arc though, he's going to destroy the whole fucking world. So, I don't know, at that point, maybe he'll be unforgivable. Alright, you guys, that was cool. Please subscribe. I'm only 300 subscribers away from getting monetized. I will catch you later. And be out!